We've finally reached the end of both nod-krai's and Sumeru's archon quests, and with it, the story of arguably the most well-written villain in the game has come to a close. Or has it? The final dialogue certainly felt like the last nail in Dottore's coffin, and it almost certainly is. But there are still a few details that raise questions, so let's go through all of it. This entire quest was essentially Dottore organizing his own funeral, and a grand affair it was indeed. Contrary to all the theories we had about nod-krai, his death wasn't faked, nor was there another hidden segment waiting to continue his work. He actually died there. But to Dottore, death was never the end. It was simply another stage of his experiment in blasphemy. Zandik began as an ordinary human with extraordinary intelligence and deeply heretical ambitions. Among other things, he wanted to replicate divinity, achieve immortality, and break free from the bounds of fate itself. But after joining the Fatui, he first had to overcome his most major constraint, his own mortality. And so he created the segments after researching the methods used to create Scaramouche. To do so, he had to freeze time and give up parts of his soul, preserving different versions of himself across different ages. Yet the same process that completed him also limited him. A soul trapped in the past could never develop new perspectives. He also created an elixir of immortality to extend the life of the original Zandik. However, it never worked on him and he died at the age of 85. His segments took that as an opportunity for self-dissection and used it to improve the elixir. But I doubt the reason the original elixir didn't work on him was because it wasn't good enough. The real reason may have had to do with his soul. When speaking with Pantalone, Dottore laments the limits of humanity. No matter how much he calculated, he could never find a way to reduce how little of a soul was required to sustain a person. That may explain why the elixir failed him. Pantalone's soul remained whole and intact the entire time, while Zandik repeatedly gave up parts of his own soul to create the segments. So the very act that allowed Dottore to transcend humanity may have also doomed the original Dottore from the very beginning. The Dottore we knew best, the segment in the prime of his life, was Dottore at 35 years old, the most radical, selfish, and insane version of himself. But after destroying his other segments in exchange for the Gnosis, he realized that it was about time he find new perspectives. Dottore began researching how to split and transfer souls directly, and engaged in several experiments in doing so. It's mentioned that he began with animals and used the souls of other people as test subjects. Sound familiar? It mirrors the experiments conducted inside the energy fields in nod-krai almost exactly. After the second phase of these experiments, Dottore came up with the plan to digitize the second half of whatever was left of his soul. According to him, splitting the soul was not the difficult part. The real challenge was creating a reliable transfer mechanism capable of guiding the soul to its intended destination. More importantly, he explicitly states his intention was to first conquer the world of the living and then the world beyond death. So death was never a failure in his experiment, it was a requirement. Which raises the question, did God Dottore actually intend to die in nod-krai all along, or did we just speed up the inevitable? It's difficult to say. Half of what was left of his soul remained within the prime segment, and the other was converted into pure data and stored in the Northland Bank. Dottore drafted his final will. Upon his death, the portion inside the segment would naturally return to the ley lines, while the digitized half would be manually released into them by Pantalone. The two halves would reunite within Irminsul, preserving his memories forever as an immortal record. And through sheer force of will, Dottore continued experimenting in the afterlife, ultimately forcing Nahida's hand into destroying Irminsul altogether. In the end, he remarks that the process of the experiment mattered just as much as the results, and he didn't care for the results as much as people thought he did. Perhaps that alone fulfilled his ambition. The fact that he successfully committed acts of blasphemy no human had ever achieved before. Considering Dottore's actions were what led to the destruction of Irminsul, loosening the grasp that fate has on the world, then watching it burn may have well felt like his magnum opus. By the end of the quest, Dottore's final words truly serve as the final nail in his coffin. He admits that the experiment in blasphemy is over, sees no further outcomes, and it's all followed by a farewell scene with the closest thing he ever had to a friend, Pantalone. And I truly believe he is gone for good this time, and it is a fitting end for his character. But before that, there's a very interesting conversation he has with Pantalone. Dottore proposes another experiment. In the event his soul were to be completely depleted, what if someone reconstructed him using memories stored within another person and using Pantalone's soul as the base? But of course, Pantalone immediately rejects the idea, and understandably so. He clearly has no intention of sacrificing his soul for Dottore. But the reasoning he gives is important. If any fragment of Dottore's soul still exists, there would be no need for such an experiment. And if no fragment remained, then nobody capable of carrying out that reconstruction would exist. Which brings us to the strangest detail in the entire quest, the lizard. This thing follows us all the way from nod-krai to Sumeru, constantly appearing in suspiciously deliberate ways. Wildlife almost never shows up this much in Archon quests, especially not one sharing Dottore's exact color palette. So it's strange enough to say the least. And I've been seeing this theory absolutely everywhere, and I originally wrote it off as Dottore fans coping. But for the sake of science, let's give this one a serious thought. The lizard may contain a fragment of Dottore's soul. We already know Dottore was capable of transferring souls into animals. We watched it happen in real time in nod-krai. The choice of a lizard may also connect back to Escher, the identity Dottore used during his scheme in Inazuma. In real life, there was a famous artist named MC Escher who created mathematically inspired artwork. One of his works, Reptiles, depicts lizard-like creatures emerging from flat patterns. Some interpretations even describe it as symbolic of reincarnation. So in Genshin's context, this lizard may genuinely contain a surviving fragment of Dottore's soul. From here, there are countless directions that this could go. Going back to Dottore's words with the limits of humanity and the minimum soul required to sustain an individual, perhaps this is his solution, inhabiting a body that requires far less soul to maintain. Pantalone's words still hold true. There's nobody capable of turning that fragment back into Dottore as we know him. And realistically, I don't think a lizard is going to accomplish much anytime soon. But in all seriousness, if that lizard really did have a fragment of Dottore's soul, then Thoth should have recognized it when he picked it up, since he's met Dottore in the past. I'd sooner believe that the lizard is a Snezhnayan spy than Dottore himself. But if it really is him, perhaps that, in and of itself, is another perspective he gets to view the world from. And finally, there's the matter of the Pyro Gnosis, which conveniently managed alongside the destruction of Irminsul. The obvious assumption that a lot of us have come to is that Pantalone or one of his subordinates recovered it during the chaos and quietly returned to Snezhnaya. But honestly, I don't think it's that simple. Maybe the burning of Irminsul destroyed the Gnosis alongside Dottore himself, or maybe, just maybe, the lizard stole it. So, does this theory hold any merit, or are the writers trying to bait us? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments, and consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.